Hi, I'm Ed Atkins. I'm just here to introduce what I did for the annual report, as in the conceiving and realizing of the look of the thing. I guess initially I want to just say thank you, because it's quite the illustrious list of artists that have done this peculiar commission. I mean, in a way, it is one of the strangest commissions, in a way. You know, it feels almost antithetical to imagine an artistic approach to an annual report. An annual report being kind of what I would at least have previously imagined to be probably the driest kind of document you could possibly imagine. You know, sort of fascinating, but only in its completely singular, hermetic world, that it's only really relevant to a particular set of people. Having said that, the limits of the annual report, its precision and its reality, you know, how non-fictional it is, lends the commission a kind of peculiar lunacy, which I think a lot of the artists, including me, have responded to. You know, that within this kind of very hard, delimited situation, one can go a bit mad. Anyway, and what a year to be doing it, you know, 2020. Any attempt to kind of reflect the wider world within the annual report. I mean, people mention it in their introductions and prologues and all kinds of epilogues and things. But really, it's an impossibly large thing to encounter. So I tried to wear it lightly. In a way, just rely on everyone's knowledge of 2020 to kind of flavour the entire thing, really. Mainly, the idea kind of came from those sorts of objects which have been keeping me going in the last year, and how conspicuously opposite and they are from digital sort of experience. You know, the fact that all of our lives are predominantly mediated and conducted digitally these days, and particularly over the last year, has meant a kind of reaction, I think, and a kind of approach to the tangible and material and bodily excesses, you know, all of that stuff. I've pined for it, I think, like most people. And I wanted to make an object which I guess was sort of born of that world, of a massively analog, kind of anachronistic, technologically Luddite world of handwritings and drawings and paintings and paper. So really, that's where it started, and it quickly sort of escalated into, okay, I'm going to handwrite the whole thing and hand draw it and illustrate it and make it this thing that would somehow be redolent of both a diary, you know, in the same way that an annual report is a kind of corporate diary to a certain extent. But this thing would become intimate and personal and oblique, you know, as if reading a stranger's diary, or the ravings of a kind of proto-Nostradamus hermit lunatic, really. I kind of carried a lot of those sorts of fantasies with me. But mainly I just wanted it to be small, person-sized, you know, individually intelligible as a physical thing, you know. The hand of the person that wrote it is so so evident, and the gestures of the drawings, the kind of imagination, all of these things, I wanted them to be excessively analog and personal and intimate and all of those sorts of things. You know, so I hand wrote the whole thing in this kind of tiny thing, using materials that I thought were, you know, again, sort of caricatures of office paraphernalia, like the legal yellow pad, biros, you know, to write out the writings, and using post-its as the kind of vessel for the illustrations, the graphs, the diagrams. You know, graphs and diagrams, these things have really been sort of pushed through a wet filter of sort of fantasy and imagination. But they, you know, actually the whole thing is, it functions, you know, you can use it in whatever way one uses an annual report, but one reads it and it's all in there. in my part, and there is the handy typeset version in the back for those of you that don't really care to plough through the spidery handwriting of a mad person. But the diagrams, if they weren't explicitly diagrams in there, then I wanted those still to be sort of redolent of the language and the scale and the kind of morphology of graphs and diagrams. So, for example, the page with Michael's introduction on has this kind of bulbous, tumorous version of a Venn diagram sort of collapsing there. And then on other things, there's this sort of there's the prison bars and the tally charts keepings, so that it's sort of flip-flopped between this sort of peculiar symbolic order of bar charts and numerology and a kind of occult in some way, but also just the doodles of someone with a pad and a load of post-its, albeit I hope eerily well executed and strange. I used a whole raft of different kinds of pens, markers, paint pens, a lot of paint, these fantastic Posco pens, but really I just wanted it, it was such a joy to compose each page, to allow the writing, when unguided, to just sort of curve across the paper in these tiny anti kind of obsessive compulsive little lines. I suppose I wanted it to kind of contain within it a fiction, that it became a kind of prop item, that this thing would be like, a prop. Anyway, it was a joy to do it, and I hope that it gives you as much pleasure as it did me, and I hope that it is as kind of poignant as I intended it to be. But mainly, I suppose, I hope that 2021 is nothing like 2020, although it's sort of starting off a bit shit. But we'll get there. And I hope that maybe your next annual report is some slick, sanitized, wipe clean, legible thing, rather than this. This is the sort of scurf of humans, Anyway, thank you again, and have a lovely 2021. Bye-bye.